Welcome to a journey through the history of art. We will travel along a timeline from the caves to the 19th century. My name is Dr. Jeanne Willette. Let's begin by making the familiar unfamiliar. Walking into the Uffizi Museum in Florence. When I was still a graduate student, I remember the excitement of seeing Cimabue's Madonna of 1280, painted for the Church of Santa Trinita, hanging next to Giotto's Ornasanti Madonna of 1310. Separated in time by a mere 25 years, but by a generation, worlds apart, these large paintings, altarpieces, summarize the transition from the Italo-Byzantine iconic style of the older artist to the next major historical period, the Renaissance, predicted by the younger artist. The Renaissance, a French word meaning rebirth, is born here at the beginning of the 14th century. Comparing the master, Cimabue, with his pupil Giotto is a standard art historical lecture, and certainly we can see the student has become his own master, rejecting the otherworldly insubstantiability for a more solid and three-dimensional Madonna, a real woman with a real child in the real world, sitting solidly in an impressive heavenly throne, flanked by saints and angels. This return to physicality presaged and accompanied the revival of classical art and classical culture. But, for our purposes, what is so remarkable about the proto-Renaissance of the 14th century is the reappearance of something we take for granted today, artists' names. Suddenly, individuals, named artists, emerged from the throngs of unnamed artisans and anonymous craftspeople. Tuscany, the northern section of Italy, was dotted with small towns around Florence. Siena, Arezzo, Padua became centers for artistic innovation. For artists to invent new forms, it would have to be at the request of patrons. The Lorenzetti brothers, Pietro and Ambrogio, were considered radical in their own time, but Ambrogio received a plum assignment from the Sienese government to paint a pair of wholly secular murals on good and bad government. The brothers were very ambitious. Pietro tackled the problem of fitting the humanized royal family into actual architecture, and Ambrogio attempted to combine landscape and cityscape, making the Sienese setting believably populated by contemporary Italians. Both brothers used a rudimentary form of something that would be perfected later, perspective, in order to achieve these new illusions of three-dimensionality. In contrast, Duccio and Simone Martini followed the old medieval styles more closely, but they allowed new narrative human elements to enter into religious painting, grounding spirituality in psychological facts. Opening the door to the Renaissance, Giotto is the best known among these artists, perhaps because his supposed story was told so colorfully by Giorgio Vasari's Lives of Artists, published in 1550. Writing 200 years later, Vasari, a Mannerist painter, related a tall tale of Giotto being discovered or coming to the attention of Cimabue due to his talent in drawing. Perhaps more remarkable than knowing the names and lives of individual artists is the fact that Vasari wrote of a concept we would call artistic talent. Suddenly, the cultural impetus of the medieval period began to look exhausted, and abruptly new approaches to painting began to emerge, and sculpture, indebted to the classical era, appeared. Giotto's series of murals in the Arena Chapel in Padua signaled that the Renaissance was underway. Commissioned by Enrico Scrivini, the chapel was meant to atone for the sins of usury committed by his father. Begun in 1505, the cycle of frescoes covered the life of the Virgin and the life of Christ in a series of narratives that placed the Holy Family firmly where they actually lived, earth. In contrast to the static, stiff conventions of the Byzantine tradition, Giotto the storyteller gave the viewer a series of theatrical dramas. exciting scenes full of pathos and feeling. Humanism had returned to art, accompanied by something entirely new called talent.